Hello and welcome. In this presentation, I'll be talking about capacity sizing decisions. In particular, the focus will be on strategic capacity planning. Now, when we think about capacity planning hierarchy, it can be thought in terms of different time horizons. On one end, we have executional capacity planning, where we are really concerned about 0 to 30 days of capacity planning, and the planning buckets typically are in hours or days. These would be examples like scheduling that you do for existing resources. The other extreme is that of strategic capacity planning, and this is the one where the time horizon is between 1 to 5+ years. And here the planning buckets happen to be in quarters or years, and the decisions we are taking are not the scheduling decisions anymore. It's about capacity expansion or contraction of these hard to flex resources. For example, investment in a new plant, investment in a new retail store or a warehouse. So we have to also think about capacity technology. We have to think about capacity location. So these are two extreme ends of capacity planning. And in between, you have tactical capacity planning, where the time horizon is between 1 to 18 months. These are the aggregate planning that we normally do in manufacturing planning and control. The planning buckets happen to be weeks or months, and the kind of decisions we are taking here are the optimal allocation of existing capacity or capacity levels of some of the resources we have. Now, our discussion here will be focused on strategic capacity planning, where companies are thinking about investments in a new facility or investment in assets so that they can increase the number of units that they can produce, or even if they have to contract, how do we plan those decisions? Now, when we think about strategic capacity planning, there are certain challenges. First of all, capacity is a soft, malleable constraint. It is soft because the capacity basically is going to be anything beyond which your marginal cost increases. So that particular number is something which we don't necessarily have as a hard number. Many times you'll see that the company has a certain capacity of outputs that they can produce, but you will hear managers saying we are running at 110% capacity. So in some sense, there is always possibility of extracting output from a given capacity. So it's a soft, malleable constraint, and one needs to be able to manage it. Number two, capacity is like a black art because there are a lot of things that it depends on. We don't necessarily have a clear understanding of what exactly is that unit that we should be calling capacity. For example, for a plant, if they're operating for 250 days versus 365 days in a year, that would mean very different things in terms of what the definition of capacity is. So even the definition of that unit or the number of days will play an important role in what the capacity is. So it depends on many things, including what exactly you consider as that unit that defines capacity. There are capacity frictions. Normally, when you think about investment in a new capacity and the time when that capacity is available, there will be a lead time. So that's a friction in terms of the lead time. Second, most of the time capacity increases are not happening on a continuous scale. You don't increase one extra unit in terms of your capacity. You increase in terms of a lump sum increase of units. So therefore there's a lumpiness in capacity. There is a fixed cost involved, which also is a kind of friction that capacity decisions entail. Now, capacity requires large and irreversible investment. That's a challenge because it's the amount that has been invested in capacity, which gets depreciated quite fast. And essentially, one has to be aware of that in terms of the investment at the time of investment. And this is a large amount of money, so one has to be careful about it. And that provides a challenge for capacity decisions. Capacity decisions can be political because in most organizations, the amount of capacity that you manage provides sort of a political power for the person involved. And hence, many times, this decision about increasing capacity is dictated by internal politics of a company. Measuring and valuing capacity shortfall is not obvious. Many times, when you're losing sales because of lack of capacity, there is no mechanism to capture that data of how much you're losing. And if we don't have information about the lost sales because of lack of capacity, we don't know how much we should be valuing that extra capacity, how much of that revenue we have lost, and in turn, the net profits we have lost. Okay, so that is a challenge. And then finally, capacity investments involve long-term planning under uncertainty. And this is perhaps the greatest challenge for capacity strategy, because we are talking about longer time horizons. And within those long time horizons, we are also talking about uncertainties that are involved. So we need to be able to manage both the time as well as the uncertainty. So then the question is, how do we approach a capacity sizing decision? Capacity can be increased as a new facility, which is a greenfield project. It could be extending existing facility, what we call brownfield project. Many times you can actually extract capacity from existing assets by improving your processes. This would be, for example, continuous improvement process, value stream mapping, increasing the value from every process. That increases your capacity. One can outsource some production that provides capacity, and adding shifts to existing facilities is also a way to increase capacity. So there are many different approaches to capacity sizing, and each of them have different ramifications in terms of the type of decisions you will have to take. The factors that will influence this expansion strategy would be, for instance, the demand growth curve, how fast the demand is growing, whether this particular industry where the company is operating, does it have scale economies in capacity and production? In other words, with every extra unit you produce, do you start seeing reduction in your marginal cost? And quite related to that, another facet is learning curves, which appear to be quite dominant in some industries. One needs to be aware of whether that industry has learning curves involved in production, where as we continue making products, eventually we start seeing the marginal costs to go down. A factor that also influences capacity expansion decisions is a technology roadmap, or in general within the industry, what exactly is the direction that this technology is going in. And if we were to invest in a new technology, let's say a new plant with some investment in technology in it, and the technology itself is moving at a very fast pace, that will play an important role in how fast you can in the next turn invest in capacity. So the technology roadmap, which happens parallel to your capacity decision, will play a role in how you would expand your capacity. Customer stickiness with the products that a company is making will play a role. The more stickiness there is for that product, a lot more customers are buying it. There is a good rationale for having a capacity for that kind of a product. Competitors many times influence decisions made by companies in investment in capacity. Capacity expansion strategy is influenced by your supply base. If you have a large supply base who can provide you the required raw materials and components, then you have the room for capacity expansion yourself, provided there is demand for all this. And there is a two-way interaction between this. So you increase your capacity, then also look for additional supply base. Access to capital, when the cost of capital is low, which also actually relates to time value of money. In those cases, you do have motivation for investment in capacity, and that's something sometimes influencing expansion strategies. And then uncertainty within the market. It will play a very important role in how you would expand. And that's something which we will look forward to making some decisions on as part of the capacity decision. Now, when we incorporate uncertainty, which is an important aspect of strategic capacity planning, one needs to think about it in terms of the types of uncertainty that one can encounter. On one end, we could have uncertainty which is sort of very low, a clear enough future. So we know that this is the way demand is going, and we can plan the capacity accordingly. A slightly different way to think about uncertainty, which would be relevant for some industries, where there could be alternative futures that can exist. So you would have to think of it in terms of decision tree, that what if the alternative future happens to be in this particular branch, and then what kind of decisions you should be taking about capacity versus if the alternative future happens to be in this particular branch, which will mean very different things. Now, many times in industries, you don't have a discrete alternatives like you see here, but it's a continuous set of possibilities. And in those cases, you will have to use probability distribution to incorporate risk. And finally, the fourth situation is true ambiguity, that we don't know where the market is going. A new product is being launched, a new technology is being deployed to the market. We don't really know what the technology will do or the product would do, and hence, very true ambiguity exists in that situation. So with that, I think we have an understanding of strategic capacity planning, and this provides an understanding of the types of challenges and how we will be going about taking care of some of them. Thank you.